There is a kind of silence that doesn't mean peace, not the quiet after a storm, not the hush of sleep. This silence breathes beneath the ground. It doesn't rest, it waits. On the world of Krieg, there is no sunlight, no open sky. The air is poison. The mud is deep enough to swallow a man whole, and the war never ends. For most in the Imperium, war is a mission. For Krieg, war is the only way to live. The soldiers there are born underground, trained without names, and sent to die in battles that will never be recorded. They don't ask why. They dig, they fight, they vanish. But some trenches dig back. Some memories echo too long. And when time begins to twist, even the Emperor's light feels far away. This story comes from a recovered trench log. No name, no rank, just a voice, buried too deep. It speaks of gas that never fades, orders that repeat, and shadows that march without orders. If you listen closely, you might hear the mud moving. Or maybe it's just your thoughts trying to escape. Now sleep, if you can. I don't remember my real name. That was taken from me during sorting. I was given a number, a mask, and a shovel. And for a long time, that was enough. On Krieg, we do not ask questions. We are not taught to wonder. We are told to endure. The surface burns. The tunnels stretch for miles. And the trenches never stop growing. They say we are winning, but I have never seen an enemy. Not once. My first post was here, Sector 7 Gamma. The earth groans underfoot. Gas leaks from every crack. Sometimes I think the war ended centuries ago and no one told us. Sometimes I think we're the only ones left. But I can't leave. My orders don't change. I wake. I dig. I stand watch. And lately, I hear things. The Vox says my name, but no one speaks it. The trench walls hum like lungs. The same face keeps returning, but he's always dead. I am starting this log because I need to remember. Not for command, not for honor, for myself. Before even my thoughts are no longer mine. This is what the trench took. This is what it gave back. The sky on Krieg is always the same. Grey. No light breaks through. You can't tell if it's morning or night. There's no sunrise, no sunset, just a dull brightness that never moves. The clouds hang low and press down on everything. The air tastes like rust and old oil. When we arrived at the trench line, the earth sucked at our boots. We had to use metal picks just to get the transport ramp open. The mud didn't want to let us out. I was one of 37 guardsmen assigned to this line. No name, just a number. The walls of the trench had been carved before us. Some parts were older than the regiment. I saw bones in the walls, skulls without helmets, rifles left stuck in the dirt as if their owners had just stepped away. Our sergeant didn't speak much. He pointed. We followed. We lined up shoulder to shoulder, silent, just like we had been trained. The line stretched beyond vision. If there was an end, no one had ever walked to it. First night, I was on watch. That's when I noticed the noise. It wasn't the wind. Wind doesn't whisper. It breathes. It drags words through the wires above the trench. I leaned closer, thinking it might be a misfire in the Vox cable. I checked my headset, but it was clean. Still, something kept scratching at the edge of the signal. A wet sound, like lips moving underwater. My pulse didn't rise. On Krieg, fear isn't a luxury. But something inside me knew that sound didn't belong to anything alive, or anything dead. One of the others, number 67 Delta, spoke out loud. He said he'd heard music. We all turned. We weren't supposed to speak unless spoken to. The sergeant walked over and stared at him. Didn't say a word. just stared. 67. Delta went quiet after that, but during the next rotation, he didn't move. He was still breathing, still clutching his las rifle, but his eyes were wrong. They weren't looking forward, they were looking behind, as if something was standing just over his shoulder. That's when I began the log. There was no real fighting yet, no traitors, no Xenos, no charge, just digging and waiting. The trench wasn't just for cover, it was a maze. I got lost once, chasing a signal. Ended up in a corridor with metal-plated sides. The mud was smooth there, not broken. Too clean, too quiet. I called out. I knew the others should be close, but my Vox was dead. Not broken, dead. No feedback, no click, just air. That was the first time I felt the trench breathe. The walls pulled in as if they were listening or remembering. I backed out, didn't run. We're not allowed to run. Later, I asked the tech priest if that section was part of the new trench layout. He tilted his head, ran a data needle across his cogitator, and said, "That segment is pre-deployment, locked." But I had just been there. I asked to go back and check. He refused. The next cycle brought rain, not water, acid ash. It fell in slow spirals and hissed against the helmets. We huddled under the trench roof, wrapped in our greatcoats. A few began coughing. One guardsman, young by Krieg standards, asked for more filters. The commissar overheard and stepped out of the shadows. He didn't shout. He didn't punish. He just leaned in and said, "Your lungs are not yours. They belong to the Emperor. Use them until he takes them back." The coughing stopped after that. I started to dream. At first, they were simple, cold, marching. A figure in front with no face. But as days passed, they grew louder. I saw my hands holding a spade that wasn't mine. I saw a trench filled with statues of soldiers, each one posed like they were frozen mid-step. Their helmets weren't standard issue. They were cracked, broken, twisted into shapes that made no sense. In one dream, I saw a mirror. I looked into it. My mask was wrong. My mouth moved, but no sound came out. Behind me, the trench twisted and turned, folding into itself like a coil. The sky above had eyes. They blinked once, then closed. Waking up didn't help. The feeling stayed. The mud clung tighter each day. It wasn't like soil. It was thick, warm. It remembered where you had stepped. Once, after I returned from latrine duty, I found my boot prints walking in the opposite direction. I checked the path twice. I had not walked there yet. I tried to explain this to another guardsman, 88 Lambda. He just nodded and said, "It's just Krieg." Then he turned and walked straight into a dugout we had filled in the day before. He didn't return. I asked the quartermaster to pull his file. He said there was no such guardsman assigned to our unit. That night we received orders. Not over Vox, not on data slate. A runner delivered them. Old parchment, ink still wet. The wax seal was marked with a regimental logo we didn't recognize. The orders were simple. Hold the line, dig deeper, remain still. They were signed by a general who had died 100 years ago. We followed them anyway. Because on Krieg, orders don't expire, not even after death. I went to sleep again. This time I didn't dream. I heard breathing from beneath the trench boards. Not rats, not water. Breathing, slow and deep. When I woke, there was a handprint on my chest plate. It wasn't mine. The trench was quiet the next day. No Vox chatter, no orders, no movement. I stood on watch, staring at the grey horizon. The clouds above didn't shift, not even a little. Hours passed, then more. Then the bells rang for a change in shift. Except no one came to replace me. I stood for 12 hours, alone. Eventually the sergeant came. He didn't ask why I was still there. He didn't thank me. He handed me a fresh filter and said, "Trench remembers." Then he left. I checked my log. I had recorded everything. Dates, times, voices. But the file had reset. Only one entry remained. This one. If anyone finds this log, tell command the trench is deeper than we thought. Not in size, in memory. It remembers us before we arrive, and it forgets us too soon. Even now, as I speak, I can hear my voice echoing from a part of the trench I've never walked. It's saying something I haven't said yet. It's saying my name, but I don't remember giving it. The shelling started again. Not close. Far off, always in the same place. We could hear the echo roll across the field. It was deep, like something waking up under stone. No blast followed, no dust clouds. Nothing ever landed. I kept count. By the third day, the shells had sounded over 200 times. Not one hit the ground. Commissar Thalen told us this was normal. He said the artillery gods of Krieg fire without pause. He called it the music of patience. He stood in the rain, listening to the shells that never came, as if waiting for a reply. But something in me knew better. One morning, I walked to the comms trench. It had been silent for 3 shifts. The Vox relay was still warm. No message, no static. Just a soft humming that changed pitch when I stepped closer. It wasn't a fault. It felt like it was following me. I adjusted the frequency. The channel flicked between blankness and a tone like a human voice stretched across metal. I recognized the pattern, the same 7 notes repeated. Over and over. At first I thought it was a warning code, but one of the junior comms guards, a pale boy with shaky hands, leaned in and whispered, "It's a lullaby." He didn't say which one. He didn't need to. The tone stayed in my head. That night I heard it again, without the Vox. It came from under the trench bed. I didn't sleep. Next shift, the shelling grew louder. But the direction had changed. I checked my map. There were no units to the north. Nothing but rock and gas swells. Still, the sounds moved closer. The other guardsmen began keeping count too. They etched tallies on their helmets. After the 4th day, a trooper named 41 Sigma stopped eating. He stood in the trench, helmet off, looking up at the sky with a strange smile. He said, "They're learning to miss us on purpose." Then he dropped his weapon and walked into the open. He didn't even make it 5 paces, but not because of fire. No one stopped him. He just vanished. He took 1 step forward, and then he was gone. There was no blood, no scream, no crater. Just his shadow burned into the mud like it had stayed behind. Commissar Thalen didn't comment. He passed down a replacement las rifle and marked the daily report with "adjustment made." When I asked if we should log the disappearance, he said, "Only the trench remembers." I stopped asking questions after that. Each night, the dreams worsened. This time, I stood at a fire base, deep underground. I could see my reflection in a sheet of steel bent from heat. My armor was clean, too clean, like it had never been used. Behind me, voices argued. I turned to see my own squad, but their faces were blank, wiped smooth like masks carved from bone. They shouted orders, but their mouths never moved. The sound came from the trench itself, the walls pressing closer with each word. I woke up with blood in my ears. The medic said it was pressure, stress, nothing unusual. Then he walked away and forgot we had spoken. He asked me the same question 10 minutes later, like it hadn't happened. Time broke. That's the only way I can explain it. The meals came at the wrong hour. Watch rotations stopped lining up. I walked to the latrine, turned back, and saw myself leaving again. I thought it was exhaustion. But then I checked my gear. The chrono on my chest plate had stopped. Not frozen, stopped. The hands moved, but always backward. I reset it. I watched it for hours. Each tick moved the time further into the past. Still, we stayed at our posts. We watched the no man's land that never changed. Once I thought I saw figures out there. Not enemy, just shapes. They moved like soldiers, but wrong. Their pace was slow, steady, and unnatural. They walked in perfect lines, heads tilted forward, rifles dragging in the dust. No one else saw them. I blinked, and they were gone. That same hour, a shift change was called. The bells rang once, then twice, then stopped. We waited. No replacements came. The squad stood silent, uncertain. We didn't move. That's when 12 Kappa spoke. He said we had already rotated. We hadn't. But his boots were muddy from a sector we hadn't marched to yet. And when I looked at his rifle, it had dust on the barrel. Grey dust, not like Krieg mud, but the ash found deeper underground. He said he dreamed of marching with the squad, only not with us, not with this squad, with another. He said he saw our faces, older, dirtier, cracked open like statues. He said I died first. Then he walked to the dugout and sat alone, facing the wall. He didn't speak again. The next morning, I returned to the comms trench. The Vox was silent. No tone, no hum. But the boy was gone. In his place was a helmet. Inside, a scrap of parchment. No ink. Just a name, mine. I held it tight. The parchment felt warm. The writing was fresh, but I hadn't written it. I asked the commissar what to do. He looked at the note, read it, and nodded. "Good," he said. "You're starting to understand." Then he walked into the fog and didn't come back for 2 shifts. I started to feel the same days again. I knew this because I kept seeing the same error. A loose wire above the trench post near ammo cache 17. It sparked once every 8 minutes. I timed it. It never changed. I started writing things twice, just to see if the day would notice. The second copy never stayed. It erased itself. My hands stopped shaking after that. It didn't matter. The trench decided what stayed. That night, the lullaby returned. Not through the Vox, from the boards under my bunk. It played the same tune, but slower. Each note dragged out longer, like something was trying to remember how it went. I didn't report it. There was no point. Orders came again. Same runner, same ink, same hand. This time, the parchment was older. Yellowed, crisp around the edges. It broke in my fingers when I opened it. The message was short. "Hold the line. The Emperor is watching." It was dated 2 centuries before our campaign began. We followed it anyway, because nothing else made sense anymore. I stood on watch that night. I heard the shell fall. It landed far off, quiet. But the ground trembled beneath my boots. The trench leaned in, as if waiting to see if I'd notice. I did, but I said nothing. Because on Krieg, noticing is the same as remembering, and remembering gets you marked. Marked for what? I don't yet know. But the mud knows. It's waiting. We received a warning 2 shifts before the cloud hit. It came through Command Vox, short and sharp. "Prepare for atmospheric alteration. Deploy rebreathers. Remain in trench." No explanation followed. We were used to that. Gas storms on Krieg came often. Some natural, others not. Most times the wind pushed it through in a few hours. This one was different. The ash in the air thickened first. It drifted lower, curling through the barbed wire and pooling inside the dugouts. The trench took on a darker color. Everything dimmed. The lanterns gave off a red haze that didn't reach far. I switched out my mask filter and checked my seal. Nothing felt off. Still, the taste was wrong. It started with the smell, rotten metal and sweet oil, like rust mixed with sugar. It hung in the back of the throat. We all noticed it. No one spoke. After an hour, the gas turned green. Not bright, not glowing, just tinted, like mold soaking into paper. The fog thickened until we couldn't see more than a few meters ahead. Then the coughing started. It wasn't loud, just small sounds, controlled. We're trained not to panic. A few guardsmen leaned against the trench wall, adjusting filters. A tech priest passed down the line, reciting rites of sealing, blessing the breath units with incense. It didn't help. The sound of the coughing changed. It picked up a rhythm. Every few minutes, someone else would join in. At first, I thought it was from strain, filters failing, lungs burning from the weight of the storm. But the noise began to shift. One guardsman, 14 Epsilon, stood straight, no movement, and made a dry, choking sound. When I moved closer, I heard words between the gasps. He wasn't coughing anymore. He was speaking. I leaned in. His lips moved beneath the mask. I couldn't see them, but I heard what came out. A single sentence, broken up by breath and pain. Time broke before the trench did. I pulled him back, tried to signal the medic, but before help arrived, he stopped moving. Still upright, still breathing, but the voice continued. It came from his Vox unit. It said the same words again, not a recording. The tone changed each time, faster, slower. Then it stopped. He blinked once, looked at me, then whispered, "That wasn't me." I don't know when the wind was supposed to clear the trench, but it didn't. The gas stayed. 3 shifts passed, 4. The filters held longer than expected, but not perfectly. No one said it out loud, but the breathing got harder. A few tried to sleep, curling in their cloaks, masks tight, but some started talking in their sleep. Full sentences, clear and strange. The same voice came from different mouths, always calm, never matching the speaker's tone, like the words didn't belong to them. I stopped sleeping. I stayed in the watch blind, listening to the air move. That's when I heard the metal tapping. It wasn't a shovel or lass rifle. It was softer, a single rhythm. Tap, pause, tap, from beneath the trench. I dug a little near the edge, checking for a cracked pipe or vent. Found something else. A Vox unit, old design, covered in dirt, still working. It clicked to life when I touched it. A message played, not loud, just enough to hear. Remain still. Gas is memory, let it speak. The unit had no power cell. I buried it again. The gas didn't just stay, it deepened. It pressed in, like fog that remembered. And then the masks stopped working. Not failing, just useless. We removed them. Nothing changed. No sting, no cough, no burn. Only the sound of breath, not ours. I asked the sergeant what to do. He said, "Van, the air has changed us, but we haven't changed enough." He handed out new orders, written by hand, ink faded, signed with a name no one recognized. "Proceed to bunker line Theta V, seal the doors, hold position." We'd never received a command to move before. We packed quickly, formed rank, and moved through the trench. The gas followed. It didn't move like smoke. It waited. Each turn of the trench brought us deeper into the fog. The silence grew heavier. Then we reached Theta V. It was buried halfway in the mud, iron doors rusted shut. We broke the lock and pried them open. The bunker smelled like old blood and oil. The lights still worked. The power hummed low. Inside, there were 10 bunks, a command station, and 4 corpses. Each wore Krieg uniforms, each with sealed masks, each one seated at attention. Each one was us. Not exact copies, but close. Identical gear. Same serial numbers etched into their armor plates. I checked the closest one. It had my voice recorder. It played a log entry I hadn't made yet. The sergeant ordered silence. He sat at the desk and began copying the old orders word for word. Didn't blink, didn't question. When he finished, he stood and said, "These were our positions before we were assigned." We asked him what that meant. He said, "The trench needs us back." We sealed the bunker, turned off the lamps, waited. One by one, we heard whispers from the wall vents. Not words, breathing, slow and careful, like something didn't want to wake us. The next morning, the gas was gone. The fog had lifted, but the trench looked different. Narrower, smoother. The edges of the dugouts were rounded like worn stone, like time had passed without us. I checked my records. We'd been gone 2 days, but the outside time log said 30. 30 days. No food shipments, no replacements. But the ammo cache was full again, and someone had added new names to the trench roster. Names that matched ours. All of us. The sergeant gave new orders. "Hold the line, dig deeper." We nodded and obeyed, because that's what Krieg does. That night, the gas returned, but no one wore masks, and no one asked why. The trench remembered us, even if we no longer remembered who we were. Orders began to feel familiar. The way they were written, the rhythm in the words, how each one landed like something I had already heard. At first, no one noticed. They came through with the proper seals and delivery, marked urgent, marked sacred, marked like all things on Krieg. But I read them again, and again. They didn't change. Every line matched the last batch. No deviation in wording, no shift in tone. Even the officer's name stayed the same. I asked the quartermaster if a mistake had been logged in the relay system. He said the orders were accurate. Then he paused, checked the signature again, and said the commander who signed them died 103 years ago. Even that didn't stop us. The trench sector we were sent to clear lay south, cut off by old debris and landslides. It hadn't been touched since before we arrived, but the map in the order packet showed it open, active, ready for use. We packed gear and walked the line. Along the way, the trench changed. The walls felt tighter. Each step brought up less mud and more dust, like the ground had dried out below the surface. By the time we reached the designated point, I had the strange feeling we were walking into a place not part of this rotation. The bulkheads marking the sector were rusted over. Symbols painted in red ink warned of abandonment. The sergeant raised his fist. We primed charges, breached the door, and stepped through. Inside, silence. The air didn't stir. Heat radiated upward like the place had never cooled. Old bunkers can keep warmth for years, but this wasn't heat left behind. It felt fresh, alive. What followed didn't feel like combat. It felt like retracing step. We passed through a tunnel angled downward. No cables, no light, just pressure. The path narrowed, then opened into a space shaped like a barracks. No beds, no tables, just lockers. Each one etched with names, ours. Not just ours now. Our names appeared with earlier numbers, older marks, but familiar just the same. I opened one. The weapon inside matched my serial. The armor beside it carried the same rank, the same emblem, the same dirt pattern I had cleaned off days ago. Only now it looked older than the war. I backed away. Others checked theirs, but no one said anything. We kept moving. The spiral trench that met us outside the exit hadn't been built by regulation. It curved inward, each corner set in a perfect arc. Standard layout says you don't want curves. They break line of sight. This layout made no sense. Still, the dugouts were in place, sandbags rotten and sunken. Tools lay where they had been left, handles molded into the earth. We were told to hold here, so we did. For the next 3 shifts, we worked without question. Each assignment came with the same message: hold position, dig deeper. And so we dug. Eventually, the dirt changed color. At first it grew lighter, then silvered, until finally we struck a solid layer that rang with a hollow sound. Not rock, not steel. Something between. We cleared it slowly. A hatch appeared beneath the dust, smooth, no seams or code panel, no warning symbols, just cold, solid metal shaped into a perfect circle. We waited. A new runner arrived, orders in hand. Same script, same seal, same instruction: do not open, not until authorized. We stood guard over the hatch, expecting new instructions. They came. 2 shifts later, the same parchment, now marked with a different timestamp, told us to proceed. No locks, no codes. It opened without effort. Below lay a stairwell spiraling tight, narrow enough to walk single file. Our lights pushed against the dark, but never cleared it. Every footstep returned with a delay, the echoes slow, like sound had to pass through something thicker than air. The room at the bottom wasn't large. 1 table sat in the middle, surrounded by 7 chairs. 6 were filled. The figures in those chairs wore Krieg armor, not fresh issue. Markings from regiments that predated ours. Masks locked to faces. Breaths shallow, mechanical. Not dead, not alive. We stepped closer. I didn't feel fear. I felt like we had already been here before. The parchment on the table looked new, the wax unbroken. I took it, opened it, and read the words that followed us down every trench. Hold the line, dig deeper. Orders repeat until heard. The sergeant took the message, folded it, and sat in the 7th chair. He didn't speak. He didn't look back. We left him there. The stairs behind us felt shorter on the way up. The trench we returned to wasn't the one we entered. Layout was near identical, but the rust was in different places. The mud smelled sweeter, dugouts slightly deeper. A name had been scratched into the support timber above my sleeping board. Mine. Not fresh, not recent. A name placed there long before I arrived. Alongside it, a second name I didn't know. No one did. Then came another runner. No face under the mask, a blank plate, 1 hand outstretched. A message. I opened it. No seal, no ink, just the words already in my mind. Again, we took up position. We waited. Somewhere a bell rang. Another shift started. The same dirt underfoot, same wall beside me, same voice on the vox. We didn't speak of it. The trench didn't need us to, it already remembered. They called it a reassignment, but no one was told why. The orders came on a copper sheet, etched in lines we hadn't seen before. No parchment this time. The tech priest read the paths, said they weren't part of the active map. The tunnels were old, buried under the campaign sectors, sealed since the first push. He didn't argue the reroute. No one does when command sends the route directly. We left before the sunless sky dimmed. 14 assigned, half familiar, half drawn from deeper reserve pools. We passed old sectors where trench signs had faded and sandbags melted into the dirt. Each checkpoint greeted us with silence. No guards, no sound. just a faint mechanical hum behind the walls, like the trench remembered we were coming and cleared the way ahead of time. One servo skull lingered above the first junction. Its speaker spat static, then clicked once and said one thing: "Follow." That was enough. The path sloped downward. The mud began to thin. Stone replaced it, pressed into slabs with lines that pulsed in rhythm, slow but clear. The closer we drew to the next gate, the tighter the walls became, folding in like ribs pressed close together. We didn't question the shift. It was Krieg. Everything tightened eventually. The gate was iron and shaped like teeth. No handle, no panel, no warning. The tech priest stepped forward and whispered in machine code, placing one cog hand to the center. A line of rust peeled back, opening a crack just wide enough to step through. Inside, darkness didn't retreat from the light. It soaked into it. The ground clicked underfoot. Not metal, bone, polished, cold, and arranged with care. Skulls layered beneath our boots, their surfaces worn smooth from centuries of burial or handling. They didn't roll, they didn't shift. They stayed in place, as if placed by someone who knew how to make them settle without sound. The chamber opened around us, tall walls shaped into curves. Rows of bones ran along every surface. The dead packed tight with perfect order. No smell, no dust, just quiet. Somewhere above, air flowed through old vents, carrying a dry, weightless breeze that carried no scent but still moved across skin like breath. The chamber had structure but not purpose, not until we reached the center. A raised circle marked the vault's heart. Thin railings of bone framed the platform. In its middle stood a pillar of cracked plasteel, topped with a worn data slate. The screen blinked without prompt. When the tech priest stepped back, the screen came to life and spoke. The voice that came from it was neither synthetic nor organic. Each word carried weight, as if shaped by something deep beneath the world, not above it. The language wasn't Gothic, not at first, but I understood each line. Something had buried the meaning directly into thought. You are echoes. Flesh returns when thought remembers. War cannot forget. Each word pressed deeper than sound, striking memory before logic. The names followed. One by one, the slate cycled through records. Each listed a guardsman number, each one ours. The years beside them did not match the current campaign. Mine appeared 3 times, with date markers spread across centuries. Each entry showed the same serial, the same voice print. Only the death log changed. I had died 3 times according to the vault. A second screen powered on behind us. It lit a wall of statues. At first glance, they seemed like saints, robed figures, weapons resting by their sides, each set in vigil. But the faces weren't idealized or symbolic. They matched our own. I saw my face carved in one. Even the chipped rebreather mouthpiece I had replaced during our first week was there. Same crack, same scar, same faint weld line. Others saw their doubles too. No one spoke, not out of fear, out of memory. Something old began to settle in behind the eyes, as if the past had been peeled open and the trench was reading back what it found. We moved closer. One guardsman dropped his rifle. It didn't clatter. The floor caught it softly. The room had changed. The walls no longer echoed our steps. One of the statues moved, not much. A tilt of the head, enough to notice. The sergeant stepped forward but stopped mid-stride. His hand hovered at his side, not toward a weapon, just held in the air, like he had forgotten what he meant to do with it. A hatch opened in the floor. It hadn't been there before. Inside the space, bodies lay stacked, not like corpses from a battlefield, but arranged with care. Each one wore our gear. Each one held standard las rifles marked with fresh etching. Not old, not ancient, fresh. The tags matched ours. Same ranks, same serials, not copies, duplicates. We turned to leave, but the vault darkened. The light pulled back toward the ceiling, leaving us in dim shadow. Another servo skull floated down. It carried a scroll case wrapped in waxed cloth. When it opened, the parchment inside read one phrase: "Return assigned, memory restored, proceed as if not broken." That was all. No unit stamp, no signature. Still, the order felt familiar. We walked the path back in silence. At the gate, the iron teeth parted without prompt. The trench above had changed. It was our trench. It was not our trench. Dugouts had shifted slightly. Tools were arranged differently. Watch posts realigned. We walked past a storage locker. My name had been carved into the door. I had never touched it before. The locker opened on its own. Inside lay my rebreather, clean, fresh cloth wrapping. Inside the faceplate, a name scratched lightly with a dull blade. Not mine, not yet. The sergeant handed me the rebreather. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. At the far end of the line, a figure stood near the comms relay. No faceplate, no rank, just stillness. He held a message tube. When I took it, the metal felt warm. The scroll inside carried one word: again. And so we resumed. We fell back into routine. Duties resumed with no reference to what we'd seen. The vault never came up again, but I remembered. The trench didn't have to remind me. It knew. It had always known. We crossed into Sector 9G just after ration interval. The path had changed again. What used to be a sharp turn near the comms spire now sloped downward, a slow drop into something the maps didn't explain. We passed under bent steel beams that still bore the blackened marks of orbital fire. They'd been there long before our shift. The walls were too quiet. No vibration, no wind. The signal tower above us stood without lights, though its antenna still turned. We walked without speaking. Our breath echoed against the trench walls. The footing turned soft, more clay than soil. Every step came with resistance, not from the ground, but from something beneath it. Like the trench didn't want us moving further, but couldn't stop us either. There were no comms cables embedded in the sides, no motion sensors, no Auspex towers. This line hadn't been maintained for cycles, but it hadn't decayed either. The trench felt untouched and still alive. I glanced behind us. Our footprints vanished, not by weather, by will. The corridor opened into a hollow too wide for standard layout. It wasn't a staging point. There were no barrels, no sandbags. The walls rose higher than usual and curved inward, shaped like the interior of a chapel nave. The trench wasn't built for defense. It had been carved for something else. The arch above had no ceiling, just crossbeams, shaped like cathedral ribs, bare and hollow. Ash drifted through the gaps, falling in slow spirals. We stepped inside. The air changed, lighter, drier. The smell turned metallic with a trace of oil that had long since cooled. A faint vibration hummed beneath our boots, low enough to almost feel imagined. No one said anything. At the center stood the altar, stone, cracked down the middle. It sat raised above the trench floor by slabs that didn't match Krieg design. They were forged with uneven welds and layered plates, like something built quickly under stress. No aquila, no purity seals, only faces. Carved into the front edge, 15 of them. Each stretched at the mouth, jaws distended as if captured mid-scream or mid-prayer. The eyes were cut too wide. They didn't look at us, they looked past. The statue on the altar was worse. It stood tall, formed from crude steel and broken plating. No arms. Heavy pauldrons held cables that trailed down its spine. A tattered cloth hung from its hip, stiff with age. The face wore a half-destroyed rebreather mask, one eye lens gone, shattered. The socket beneath it lined with dried rust that had turned red as blood. A halo of rivets circled the head like a crown of nails. No inscriptions marked its surface. No origin was written, but a plate lay at its feet. Etched into the iron, steel remembers what faith forgets. The tech priest fell to one knee. No command passed. He moved like something in him had answered a call the rest of us hadn't heard. His servo arm retracted as he reached into his robes and retrieved a strip of brass keys, glyph sequences used for dormant machine rites. He tapped the altar surface. The sound echoed soft, like bells in fog. The ground shifted beneath us. A pulse moved outward from the statue's base. Not strong, but steady. It hit our boots, moved up our spines. It didn't hurt. It didn't comfort. It simply existed. The altar throbbed once. The statue's chest lit with faint orange light. Slowly it deepened to gold. One pulse every few seconds. None of us spoke. The trench didn't require it. The sergeant removed his rifle and placed it down. He unlatched a pouch from his belt and drew out a strip of parchment. 4 lines marked in black ink, a 5th only half scratched. He laid it beside the metal plate, bowing his head once. Not prayer, not respondect. Recognition. The altar pulsed again. The tech priest stood and whispered one word. Receiving. He didn't mean from us. He meant from the trench. The sergeant turned to the squad. He said the saint had been here before Sector 9G ever existed, that it breathed not with lungs but through soil, through memory, through what we buried and forgot. He said something had been interred in this line, something not marked in the archives, but never truly gone. His voice cracked when he pointed to the red fluid that had begun leaking from beneath the altar's base. It wasn't blood, no iron scent, no clotting. It stretched across the floor in fine strands, weaving through the trench planks like roots seeking water. One of the strands reached my boot. It touched the edge and stopped. Pressure passed into my ankle. Not pain, not heat. Something closer to recognition. I stepped away. The fluid pulled back, satisfied. The statue tilted forward. Its head moved a fraction. The intact lens flickered. A sharp spark danced across its chest cavity. The tech priest staggered back, cogitator stuttering. From his chest plate, a data stream bloomed. Rows of names. All listed present. My name flashed twice. The sergeant's face grew pale. He told us the altar didn't store names. It counted returns. One guardsman dropped to his knees. He looked up and said the statue wore his scar. The welded seam down its side matched the wound he'd taken on his first deployment. The crack in the mask mirrored the dent on his rebreather. The cloth at the waist bore his squad number, frayed and stitched in faded gold. I checked the statue's other side. There were 6 shallow notches on its left thigh plate. I had made those same notches. They marked the trench sectors I'd been assigned over the years. All 6 matched mine. A low sound started, a hum rising from the earth. The trench walls quivered, boards shifted slightly, realigning. Our dugout markers began to flicker in and out of visibility. Paint disappeared beneath new layers of dust. The light from the statue pulsed faster. At the far end of the trench cathedral, a servitor rolled into view. Rust streaked its chassis. The treads creaked with every turn. It carried a scroll case clutched in both arms like an offering. When it reached us, it stopped, bowed its head, and extended the scroll. The wax seal didn't match Krieg. The mark showed a broken spade. The sergeant opened it. A single sentence was written inside. "Return to assigned trench. She dreams of the 7th. He read it aloud. The tech priest froze. Then we turned back. No command needed. Our steps aligned without signal. Behind us, the light of the statue dimmed. On the return path, the trench had shifted again. The walls angled more sharply. Passageways narrowed by degrees that couldn't be measured, but were felt in the chest. The air thickened. The floor creaked louder. The numbers on the boards no longer matched any system. Some displayed old unit codes last used before the siege protocols. We passed our dugouts. Each one bore fresh carving. My cot held a new marking overhead. My name, 7 tally lines. One just added. The wood had no dust, no scent of cut timber, as if it had always been there, waiting for us to notice. We paused at the edge of our trench. The altar had faded. The statue no longer tilted. The fluid trail had reached the rim of the trench wall. Where it touched soil, the earth had turned to glass. The light no longer pulsed. But when I closed my eyes that night, the rebreather didn't hum. It breathed. And from the trench wall, something warm moved behind the boards. There are no more rotations. No shift bells ring across the trench walls. The chrono on my wrist ticks backwards when I check it. Sometimes it flashes coordinates instead of hours. We are deep inside now, inside something that was never meant to be mapped. The route here has changed behind us. I turned once and saw the trench sealed. The boards that had held our boots now pressed flat like skin over a wound. The orders never came. Not in a scroll, not from Vox, not even from the hands of a blank servitor. We just moved, all at once, like our feet remembered the steps before our minds did. The sergeant didn't speak. He raised his arm, pointed toward the corridor that had no markings, and the trench accepted our advance. Walls leaned inward as we walked. The closer we drew to the core, the more the trench folded around us. We stopped brushing past things and began passing through them. The mud turned to clay, smooth and cool, pulsing now and then like the ground had a heartbeat. Above us, no sky waited, just low ash that clung to the ceiling like damp cloth. It shifted when we breathed beneath it. We entered a sector that didn't exist on any chart. The signs had no unit designation. Instead, symbols made of thread and teeth hung from the trench braces, shapes tied in patterns that resembled regimental codes but changed every time I blinked. One moment I saw a sanction mark for recon units, the next a warning glyph for neurohazard exposure. The symbols didn't want to be read, they wanted to be remembered. We reached a mound. It stood inside a circular hollow, the soil around it packed into ribs like someone had carved a lung out of earth. A green mist hovered above the center. It didn't rise or fall. It breathed. The sergeant didn't hesitate. He walked forward, boots sinking halfway into the pulsing ground. The mound opened along a central seam, folding apart like pressed fabric. A narrow path led inside, lined with ribbed supports and coiled wire that didn't belong to any defense doctrine I recognized. The others followed. No signal, no pause, just motion. I followed them in. At first, the trench walls stayed close, tight enough that our shoulders brushed. Then the air shifted. It smelled like old steel, polish, and incense, but there was something underneath. Not rot, not decay, memory. We passed through a long corridor where the walls whispered behind us. Not words, not even sound. More like the texture of things remembered, but never said out loud. I caught glimpses between the planks, reflections, shapes watching. not moving, just waiting for us to move further. Ahead, the passage opened. The ground leveled into a great chamber without corners. Trenches spiraled outward from its heart, like veins from a black organ. The trenchwork here wasn't dug. It had grown. The planks were old bones. The nails were teeth. I stepped forward, and my boot left no mark. The center trench had already been laid. Its walls stood clean. No names, no blood, no sandbags. At the bottom rested a single spade, upright in the soil. Fresh cloth wrapped the handle. My name was stitched into it. Not in ink, but fiber, woven into the threads before I was born. The others saw their own. We didn't speak. Each picked up their assigned tool. Every handle was smooth where our fingers naturally closed. Balance perfect, weight familiar. The air folded around us as we stepped into the trench. The ground beneath us released heat, like breath from a long-buried shelter. The first shovel stroke met no resistance. The earth gave willingly. Beneath the top layer lay more than soil. Armor, standard issue, too clean, too aligned. Rank tabs and squad markings matched the current roster. Under the chest plates, bones held shape with no decay. The first face I uncovered was my own. Eyes closed, mask fused. Chest marked with a single burn line. A mistake I had made 2 rotations ago. The others began finding themselves too. Some turned away, others kept digging. The sergeant uncovered a body bearing his face. Older, battle-worn, mask cracked, but still upright. It had not been buried. It had volunteered. Its hands were empty. He reached down. The figure bowed its head and collapsed into dust. The wall behind us groaned. Boards shifted. A new trench appeared, running parallel. It hadn't been built. It had always been waiting. We crossed into it without a word. Each step felt longer than the last, not in distance, but in meaning. The trench didn't stretch forward, it stretched inward. Shadows moved inside the walls, not human shapes. Silhouettes shaped by purpose, not form. They stepped with us, keeping pace without ever touching soil. Their presence pressed against the space between sound and breath. One shape passed through me. For a moment I saw something else. A battlefield from long before I was born. Trenches filled with guardsmen wearing gear older than any I had trained with. They marched in silence, eyes empty. Their tags bore my serial. Their voices never spoke, but I felt their memories settle into place like dust on glass. They remembered walking. They remembered dying, but never stopping. The sergeant raised his hand again. This time he held something new, a data slate. No one had given it to him. He hadn't taken it from a pack. It had always been with him. He pressed the interface. The screen lit up with a name. Mine. Beside it, a counter, 8. Below that, a single phrase. One more return. He passed the slate to me and walked away. I held it long enough for the light to fade. It blinked once more and shut off. From the end of the trench, a green light shined through mist. Shapes stood in rows on either side. Not statues, not guardsmen. They wore armor without mass. Their helms held no faceplates. The red glow inside each mask flickered, unsteady, like the light had almost gone out. They stepped aside. I walked through the corridor they formed. Each figure bowed slightly as I passed. I did not recognize them, but they remembered me. The end of the trench curved upward, folding back toward the chamber's roof. A new mound waited at the center, the same as before, the same pulse, same breath. I stepped into it. Inside was a mirror, not glass, not polished metal. The surface bent. It showed a trench that led into itself. At the bottom of the mirror trench, a figure stood. It wore my armor, held my rifle, carried the same wound I had taken last week. I tried to step forward. The figure raised its hand, not in warning, in recognition. It nodded once, then stepped backward into the dark. I followed. The walls around me collapsed, not in ruin, but in revelation. Every trench I had walked unfolded from this one. Every command I had followed led here. The memories I thought were mine had been echoes. The trench had always been dreaming. We were the dream, and I was waking up inside it.